In the late 19th and early 20th century, the rapid development of firearms had led to shocking casualty rates in the various wars around the globe. The American Civil War, which saw so many advances in weaponry, saw over 600,000 Americans killed. But that was only a glimpse of things to come. By the end of World War I, more than 9 million soldiers would lose their lives. Another 21 million would be seriously wounded. For 3 long, bloody years, the war to end all wars was largely a European affair. But eventually, the U.S. would come to the aid of its traditional allies of Britain and France. American soldiers would discover the devastating power of the machine gun, which had been killing European soldiers by the hundreds of thousands. The machine gun defined the experience of World War I. The Americans had gotten the ball rolling on machine guns with the Gatling gun, used near the end of the Civil War. But although this was the first continuous firing gun, it was not truly an automatic weapon, as it required a person to turn a crank to load the cartridges. That changed with the 1884 invention of Hiram Maxim, an American-born British inventor. Maxim used the energy of the gun's recoil to eject the spent cartridge and insert the new one. This greatly reduced the labor of loading the gun compared with the hand-fed Gatling gun. It also reduced the gas buildup, allowing more bullets to be fired without overheating the barrel. The Maxim machine gun of 1884 could fire about 600 rounds per minute. That was 20 times more than even the SMLE Mark III, and far more than the slower loading rifles. But the power came at a cost in weight and portability. It took a team of men to move the gun and its mounting. Though one man could fire it, usually a crew of 5 would work the gun, with one firing while others assisted with identifying targets, preparing ammunition, and carrying water to cool the gun. Maxim partnered with Albert Vickers to form the Maxim Gun Company, which was eventually absorbed into the larger Vickers Company. The Maxim gun was originally used by British forces during colonial wars in Rhodesia, South Africa, and Nigeria. Armies were initially slow to adopt machine guns due to their tendency to jam. American forces continued to rely on the Gatling gun until finally abandoning it in 1911. But gradually, the armies of Europe and the American Navy began incorporating the machine gun into their forces. Many of these guns were variations on Maxim's 1884 gun. For example, the German Army's Maschinengewehr 08, or the MG08, was an adaptation of the Maxim gun. The MG08 and a lighter, more portable MG08-15 was the standard machine gun for German forces in World War I. The MG08-15 had an effective range of 2,200 yards, although it could reach almost 4,000 yards at the extreme. The gun had a 1-gallon jacket around the barrel which held the water to cool the gun. The MG08-15 could deliver devastating firepower, though with limited accuracy. Although it could fire up to 400 rounds per minute, generally, gunners would fire in short bursts. A 40-pound gun mounted on an 85-pound tripod, the MG08-15 was manned by a crew of 4. The British were using the Vickers Machine Gun, a variant of the Maxim gun produced by Vickers, which had absorbed the Maxim Gun Company. The Vickers gun became the primary machine gun of the British forces during World War I, though they still used some of the old Maxims. Improvements over the Maxim gun made it lighter and more portable. The gun itself weighed less than 30 pounds, the tripod another 20. When water was added to the cooling jacket, it added another 10 pounds. In all, still much lighter than the Maxims. The Vickers fired the same .303 caliber cartridge as the SMLE Mark III from a 250-round canvas belt. At a maximum fire rate of 500 rounds per minute, a single belt of ammo could be used up in 30 seconds. At the beginning of the war, the British military did not yet fully appreciate how the machine gun would change battle tactics. Each infantry battalion received just 2 of the Maxim machine guns, or Vickers if they were lucky. The guns couldn't be produced fast enough to fill all the units needing them. Experience in the war demonstrated to all combatants the importance of having machine guns manned by specialists, soldiers trained to load, fire, cool, and maintain machine guns. A single machine gun placed in a well-protected location could tear an infantry apart. And multiple machine gun nests with interlocking fields of fire could create an almost impenetrable defensive line. The Germans used the machine guns to provide a lethal defensive fire to support their Hindenburg Line, a vast network of German defenses in northeastern France. The Germans also built their famous machine gun pillboxes, as they were called by the British. The German pillbox was a miniature fort and provided another level of strength to the trench lines. The thick, reinforced concrete walls were almost impossible to crack, short of an artillery barrage. British forces seldom built machine gun pillboxes, but they and the Germans both prepared smaller machine gun posts, or nests. The British would eventually pull the heavy machine guns like the Vickers out of the infantry battalions and give them to a newly created machine gun corps. These specialists developed tactics for the machine gun, such as using them as a miniature artillery, firing them indirectly at unseen targets. They also identified how to fire their guns safely over the heads of friendly troops to clear a path for their advancing infantry. This use of machine gun barrage fire became a common tactic late in the war as the French and Germans picked it up from the British and used it themselves. But although the British had moved their heavy machine guns into the hands of the new Machine Gun Corps, they did not leave the infantry without automatic weapons of their own. The newly created Lewis machine gun was actually developed by a U.S. Army colonel with the ambitious name Isaac Newton Lewis. Lewis was unable to interest the U.S. Chief of the Ordnance Department in his gun, so he left the Army and the U.S. altogether, eventually working with the British Birmingham Small Arms Company Limited to produce his light machine gun. The Lewis gun weighed in at 28 pounds, about half the weight of the Vickers gun and tripod set. Its light weight meant that it could be carried and used by a single soldier rather than a crew. The gun used a drum pan magazine, which held 47 rounds. The Lewis gun could be produced at a much faster rate than the Vickers, providing the British Army with desperately needed firepower on the Western Front. Meanwhile, their allies, the French, were using an air-cooled machine gun, the Hotchkiss M1914. The Hotchkiss was gas-operated rather than recoil-operated like the various Maxim-style guns. It was sturdy and reliable and could be quickly produced in larger numbers. That was critical, both for the French and the U.S., because when the Americans entered the war, they wouldn't have enough machine guns of their own. The Hotchkiss was used extensively by the American Expeditionary Forces in France. American soldiers also used the French light machine gun, the Chouchou. The lightweight Chouchou was the most widely manufactured automatic weapon of World War I. Designed to be used without a tripod by a single gunner and assistant, the Chouchou could fire up to 240 rounds per minute, though its magazine held only 20 rounds. It was not intended to be used primarily as a defensive weapon, like the heavier machine guns, but to provide greater offensive firepower to the military. The American forces primarily had to use machine guns provided by their allies, primarily the Hotchkiss and the Shosho. But late in the war, a small number of heavy machine guns designed by the legendary firearms genius John Moseph Browning made it to the front. Browning was one of the most highly regarded gunsmiths of the 20th or any other century, and designed a number of reliable, effective arms used by the U.S. during the war. The M1917 Browning machine gun was only issued to the last units shipping out to Europe, but it would prove its worth in World Wars I and II and continued to be used in Korea and Vietnam. The M1917 was a heavy machine gun, firing 450 30-06 cartridges per minute. For those units who received them, it replaced the Hotchkiss. Browning also made a light machine gun to replace the Shosho that many found to be unreliable. Although, like the heavy M1917, it would see only limited use in World War I. The M1918 Browning automatic rifle, or BAR, would eventually become the backbone of U.S. forces in World War II and Korea. Weighing about 16 pounds, the BAR brought automatic firepower to the squad level.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to help us produce more compelling historical content like this, please like, comment below, and share this video with fellow history buffs. And of course, be sure to subscribe to help keep history happening.